Nobody expected Harrison Ford to cry. Not the man who survived 3 plane crashes. Not the actor who broke bones and kept filming. Not the Hollywood legend who built his own furniture from library books when nobody would hire him. But at his final press event in 2026, his voice gave out completely. He said the role had nurtured him more than anything in his career. Then he said he couldn't keep going. People in the room didn't know what to do. Was it his health? Was it the recent shingles attack that had forced him out of the Oscars? Or was it something about his 83 years that finally caught up with him? What he revealed next changed everything. Harrison Ford came into the world on July 13, 1942, at Swedish Covenant Hospital in Chicago, born to Dorothy Neidelman, a radio actress, and Christopher Ford, who worked in advertising. From the start, his life sat between 2 different worlds without ever settling fully into one. His father came from Irish and German Catholic roots, while his mother's parents were Jewish immigrants who had fled Minsk in Belarus. Yet religion never became a center of the household. Ford later joked that they were raised simply liberal of every stripe, which meant no clear traditions to lean on and no real sense of belonging either. He grew up in the quiet suburbs of Des Plaines, a shy kid. Everyone called Harry small for his age, and awkward in a way that made him an easy target. By the time he reached Ms. Meltzer Junior High, the bullying became part of daily life. Tougher boys dragged him up a hill and shoved him down again and again, leaving him shaken inside even when the bruises faded. He learned instead to keep quiet and endure it. By the time he graduated high school in 1960, he had become a loner who drifted through classes without direction. Even his own identity felt uncertain. He later admitted that, as a man, he always felt Irish, but as an actor, he always felt Jewish, a strange split that followed him into adulthood. After graduation, he headed to Ripon College in Wisconsin as a philosophy major, partly to escape home. But college only made things worse. He skipped classes, slept through days, and slid toward depression. His parents spent about $8,000 on those 4 years, and he left without a degree. No celebration waiting at home, only frustration and disappointment. That same summer, he married his girlfriend, Mary Marquardt, and talked about becoming an actor, even though he had no clear plan. The decision looked reckless at the time, but it pushed him toward the path he would follow. Acting itself came almost by accident. During his final year at Ripon, he signed up for a drama class simply because he thought it would be an easy A. His first play was the 3-penny opera at the Red Barn Theater, where he played Mac the Knife with a fake mustache. Although he was terrified, his knees shook so badly they could be seen from the back rows. Something about the experience pulled him in. Without a degree and with little money, he moved west, chasing that uncertain dream, working summer stock theater, and eventually landing a tiny role as a bellboy in Dead Heat on a merry-go-round in 1966, while taking whatever jobs he could find just to survive. The early acting years did not bring success. By the late 1960s, he was struggling to support Mary and their 2 young sons. Columbia Pictures signed him for only $150 a week, and the work rarely amounted to more than uncredited appearances. One studio executive told him directly that he would never make it in the business. The words stayed with him as he drove delivery trucks and patched leaking roofs just to keep food on the table. By 1970, the bills were too much, and he turned toward carpentry, teaching himself from woodworking books borrowed from the library. There were no teachers and no shortcuts, only trial and error. Sometimes he climbed onto roofs with instruction books in his hands, trying to understand angles before making the next cut. His first major job came almost unbelievably when Brazilian musician Sergio Mendes hired him to build a $50,000 backyard recording studio, even though Ford had never completed a project of that size before. When the work was finished, Mendes called it wonderful, giving Ford a reputation that quickly brought more jobs. Soon his clients included people whose names filled movie posters. Francis Ford Coppola hired him to build custom furniture, and later gave him small acting roles. He installed cabinets at American Zoetrope Studios, where scripts for major films sat stacked nearby. He worked quietly through the days. never knowing that these ordinary jobs were guiding him back toward acting again. In 1976, he was earning about $100 a day, building cabinets at Zoetrope while actors auditioned in nearby rooms for a new science fiction project. Covered in sawdust and focused on his work, he had no idea that producer Fred Roos had arranged for him to be there at just the right time. George Lucas had resisted using Ford again since he had already cast him in American Graffiti, but when he heard Ford reading lines, he noticed the natural rhythm in his voice and the dry humor that came through without effort. Ford stepped away from his tools to read Han Solo's lines. The character suddenly felt real in a way it had not before. Within a short time, the struggling carpenter found himself cast in a film that would change everything. Star Wars exploded after its release on May 25, 1977, and turned the unknown carpenter into a worldwide star at age 34. The fame arrived quickly, and with it came tensions. Ford pushed back against dialogue. He sounded stiff, telling Lucas during one table read that the lines might look fine on paper, but were impossible to say naturally. He began adjusting the words in small ways that gave Han Solo a sharper voice. Even after Star Wars, he nearly lost another defining role. When Steven Spielberg began casting Raiders of the Lost Ark, Lucas hesitated to use Ford again because he worried audiences would see only Han Solo. Tom Selleck became the leading choice until television contracts blocked him. Lucas finally called Ford, and after a single meeting with Spielberg, the part became his. Not every moment on those sets went smoothly. During the filming of Raiders in Tunisia, a wave of dysentery swept through the crew, and Ford was among the worst, affected too weak to handle the long sword fight that had been planned. Instead, he suggested a simpler ending where Indiana Jones would just shoot the swordsman. The quick solution turned into one of the film's most remembered moments. Years later, he returned for Dial of Destiny at age 80, accepting $25 million instead of the $65 million once offered, because he wanted the story to end on the right note. Harrison Ford's life in the air started to look more dangerous than anything he ever did on screen. On March 5, 2015, when he was 72, he lifted off from Santa Monica Airport in a vintage 1942 Ryan St. 3KR Recruit. Just a minute after takeoff, the engine suddenly sputtered and died. Ford radioed the tower, asking for an immediate return, but he knew he would never make the runway. He aimed for the Penmar golf course below. On the way down, he clipped the top of a tree. The plane slammed into the ground, carving a 25-foot trench in the turf before coming to rest upright. Fuel leaked out, but somehow never ignited. Ford had more than 5,000 total flight hours, yet the crash left him badly hurt, a deep head wound, several broken bones, and heavy bleeding. Two doctors who happened to be golfing rushed over and pressed on the wounds until paramedics arrived. His son Ben told everyone his dad was battered but alive. People could not help noticing that the airplane had been built in 1942, the same year Ford himself was born. The close calls had started years earlier. In 1999, Ford was training in a helicopter over a dry riverbed when the engine lagged during a practice maneuver. The helicopter slammed into the ground and rolled onto its side. Yet Ford and the instructor crawled out without a single injury. Even after that scare, he kept flying. In April 2020, when he was 77, Ford taxied his plane across a runway after misunderstanding an air traffic control instruction. Another aircraft was already coming in. The distance between them shrank to about 3,600 feet before the other plane cleared the runway. The FAA opened an investigation and required him to complete runway safety training. Despite thousands of flight hours and licenses covering jets, single-engine planes, seaplanes, and helicopters, the pattern made some observers uneasy. Ford stayed calm through it all, accepting responsibility each time and continuing to fly. Long before the accidents, his personal life had been shaped by struggle and complicated choices. He married Mary Marquardt in 1964, and together they headed to Hollywood. Mary held the family together while raising their two sons, Benjamin and Willard, and working as a chef and illustrator. Everything changed after Star Wars in 1977. During filming, he began a 3-month affair with Carrie Fisher, who later wrote in her 2016 book that she felt lucky and guilty at the same time. The marriage did not survive. They divorced in 1979. In the 1980s, Mary developed multiple sclerosis, and Ford quietly helped her with financial support. Their sons grew up dividing time between parents. Ford later admitted that success had made him a worse husband and father. While his first marriage was ending, another relationship was beginning. In 1976, Ford traveled to the Philippines for the chaotic filming of Apocalypse Now. A young production assistant named Melissa Matheson caught his attention. They did not start a real relationship until after his divorce, but by 1982 they were together. Melissa's career rose quickly after she wrote the screenplay for E.T., which earned an Oscar nomination. They married in 1983 at Ford's ranch in Montana and built a quiet family life with their son Malcolm and daughter Georgia. Their marriage lasted 18 years. By 2000, the distance between them had grown too wide, and Melissa filed for divorce in 2001. The divorce became famous for another reason. There had never been a prenuptial agreement. When the process finally ended in 2004, after 4 years of negotiations, the settlement reached somewhere between $85 and $118 million. While that divorce was still moving through the courts, another relationship quietly began. In January 2002, Ford attended the Golden Globes and met Callista Flockhart, who had become famous for Ally McBeal. They started dating that summer. Callista had adopted a young son named Liam in 2001, and Ford quickly embraced him. On Valentine's Day in 2009, Ford proposed, and they married in June 2010. Through the years, Ford often said Callista gave him stability and support. Against the odds of Hollywood relationships, the marriage became the calmest chapter of his personal life. Behind that calm, the family still faced serious challenges. His daughter Georgia began suffering epileptic seizures as a teenager. Around 9 years before 2016, she entered treatment at NYU Langone Medical Center through the FACES epilepsy program. The treatment finally worked, and she remained seizure-free from the day she left. Ford called the result a miracle. In March 2016, he auctioned the leather jacket he wore as Han Solo in The Force Awakens. The jacket sold for $191,000, and every dollar went to the epilepsy program that had helped Georgia. Age eventually brought new tests. In March 2025, Ford had planned to present at the 97th Academy Awards. But one day before the ceremony, shingles struck him suddenly. The virus caused severe pain and forced him to withdraw at the last moment. Doctors warned that shingles affects 1 in 3 older adults and can cause lasting nerve damage if ignored. But Ford recovered quickly and returned to work. On screen, he faced a different kind of struggle through his role as Dr. Paul Rhodes in Shrinking. The character lives with Parkinson's disease, and each season shows the condition slowly worsening. Ford's performance drew strong reactions because the fear and frustration felt real. Then came Michael J. Fox. The Back to the Future star, who has lived with Parkinson's since the early 1990s, made a guest appearance in Shrinking Season 3. In a scene that moved audiences, the two characters bond over their diagnosis. Fox later revealed that he was brought to tears by Ford's performance. "What I wasn't prepared for was how much of his own understanding of the disease he brought to it," Fox told Vanity Fair. "I recognized Parkinson's in his eyes." Ford returned the praise, calling Fox generous, supportive, open, just a wonderful person. In December 2025, SAG-AFTRA announced that Ford would receive the 2026 Life Achievement Award. When the ceremony arrived on March 1, 2026, Ford took the stage at the Shrine Auditorium to a standing ovation. His longtime friend Woody Harrelson presented the award. Visibly emotional, Ford began his acceptance speech with characteristic self-deprecation. "I feel incredibly grateful for this kind of attention. But, to be clear, I also am quite humbled. That said, it is a little weird to be receiving a Lifetime Achievement Award at the half point of my career." Then he got serious. "I was not an overnight success. I struggled for about 15 years, going from acting job to carpentry and back to acting till I finally got a part in a wildly successful film. None of this happened on my own. He spoke about finding his people. In my third year of college, I was a little lost. I was failing at school. I felt isolated and alone. And then I found a company of people putting on plays, storytellers. People I once thought were misfits and geeks turned out to be my people. Ford's voice began to crack. As actors, we get to live many lives. We get to explore ideas that affirm and elevate our shared experience. The stories we tell have a unique capacity to create moments of emotional connection. They bring us together. He finished by thanking his family, specifically naming his extraordinary, beautiful wife, Callista, and added, "I'm indeed a lucky guy. Lucky to have found my people. Lucky to have work that challenges me. Lucky to still be doing it." At an Apple TV press event on February 3, 2026, just weeks before the SAG Awards, Ford had already hinted at what was coming. Speaking about shrinking, he said that if his work on the show turned out to be his final chapter, it would already feel complete. He described the role as something that had nurtured him in a way few projects ever had. The room went quiet. People wondered if the man who had survived crashes, injuries, and decades of fame was finally preparing to step away. At his final press event in 2026, a reporter asked him directly, was he saying goodbye? Ford paused. His voice, the same voice that had told Lucas his lines were impossible to say, the same voice that had radioed air traffic control during an engine failure, finally gave out. "I can't do this anymore," he said. Then, collecting himself, he added, "Not because I don't love it, because I finally feel like I've done enough." The room sat in silence. The man who had built his own furniture from library books, who had crash-landed planes and broken bones and kept filming, who had spent 60 years pretending to be other people, that man was ready to stop running. He thanked the cast of Shrinking again. He thanked his wife, Callista. He thanked George Lucas for giving him a chance when he was covered in sawdust. Then he said something nobody expected. "You know, I spent a lot of years feeling like I didn't belong anywhere. Not Irish enough, not Jewish enough, not a good enough actor to make a living, not a good enough carpenter to be proud of. And then one day, I looked up and realized I had spent my whole life building things. Furniture, characters, a family, a life." His voice steadied. "I think maybe that's what we're all trying to do. Build something that lasts, even if we're not sure we belong to it." He stood up, nodded to the room, and walked away. No explosions, no dramatic exit, just a carpenter who had finally finished the job.